Hi, friends. Father Carey here. This is another Holy Spirit moment. And in this one, I want to do something that I rarely do. I want to share with you a personal experience. And the reason I want to do that is to try and answer a question that many people who read my books and watch these videos have asked me over the years. And the question is this: can a non believer, can a person who does not believe in God or who is at least an agnostic, still have a mystical experience? Many, many years ago, I began my college teaching career at a liberal arts college in southeastern Pennsylvania, Gettysburg College. This happened when I was about 31 or 32, at a time that I did not believe in God. In fact, if anything, I was a militant atheist. One fall day, one fall afternoon, I decided after my classes were done for the day to go for a bike ride. And I rode along a field that had soybeans growing in it. Because it was autumn, the soybeans were turning that wonderful bright gold color that soybeans do shortly before they are harvested. There was a beautiful, perfectly cloudless blue sky, the kind that you see in autumn. There was a very light breeze in the air. I was feeling perfectly fine. I stopped at one point opposite this soybean field to take a drink of water. I reached down for my water bottle. I had one foot on the tarmac and one foot on a bike pedal, and I raised up the bottle to my lips. And as I did so, I glanced over at the soybean field, and I remember thinking, wow, that looks just like a golden ocean, because the wind was rippling the soybean plants. And suddenly I was gone. There was no longer a soybean field. There was no longer Carrie on a bicycle. There was no longer a beautiful autumnal sky. There was nothing but a vast movement of gold. I had completely disappeared along with everything else. I have no idea how long the experience lasted, but suddenly I was back with one foot on the tarmac, one foot on a pedal, and my hand still raised with the bottle. In that moment, my friends, I experienced the most wonderful experience of my entire life. An experience in which I was no longer me, I was no longer present, but had somehow merged in with everything. I began to reflect upon this experience, wondering what in the world it was, and I discovered, quite to my surprise, that many other people who I read about had likewise had similar experiences, and they did not believe in God either. For example, the British poet Alfred Lord Tennyson in the 19th century famously said that he could induce a mystical experience by repeating his name to himself over and over and over. He said that it enabled him to dissolve into boundless being. This is reported, by the way, by William James in his book, The Varieties of Religious Experience. Or take the 20th century novelist and mathematician Arthur Koestler. He was imprisoned in 1937 because he happened to be on the losing side in the Spanish Civil War, and he was awaiting execution. And while he was in solitary confinement, he tried to occupy himself by scratching with a piece of chalk mathematical formulae on the walls. And at one point, he had just finished working through Euclid's proof for the infinity of prime numbers. And he looked at the equations on the wall and he said to himself, it's perfect. It's absolutely perfect, meaning the formula. And suddenly he writes, this happened. I was floating on my back in a river of peace under bridges of silence. It came from nowhere and flowed nowhere. And then there was no river and no I. The I had ceased to exist. Koestler was an atheist. Tennyson might have been an atheist, might have been a very loose deist. Or what about the 20th century novelist, the wonderful novelist Virginia Woolf. She clearly did not believe in God, and yet she also claimed to have certain experiences which she says arrived as a shock, which she called moments of being, and which, according to her, showed her that there was a orderliness and a pattern, to use her word, to reality that lay behind appearances. Let me read you just a short bit of what she writes about these moments of being. Behind the cotton wool of everyday life is hidden a pattern that we, I mean all human beings, are connected with. That the whole world is a work of art, and that we are parts of the work of art. Moments of being, a moment in which the ego dissolves, a moment in which pattern, orderliness, connectedness is discerned. This is a common experience, and it is exactly the kind of experience I had in the Golden Ocean. And all of these people, like me when I had the experience, were not believers. And it goes on from there. Friedrich Nietzsche reports having experiences like this. Bertrand Russell reports the same. So does John Dewey. And so, believe it or not, does the famous contemporary atheist Richard Dawkins. None of them believe in God, and yet all of them claim to have had an experience of connectedness, of unity, of non-ego in their lifetimes. Almost always when they are in a natural setting, when they are gazing upon beauty. Now, why? Why is it that these experiences occur to even people who do not believe in God? I think the 18th and early 19th century British poet William Blake really captured something when he wrote this in his poem, The Marriage of Heaven and Hell. He says, "If the doors of perception are cleansed, everything would appear as it is, infinite. For we have closed ourselves up till we see all things through narrow chinks of our caverns." Our doors of perception, our faculties for intuiting that which is, are gradually closed, blinding us to that which is. But occasionally, in one of those shock moments, those moments of being that Virginia Woolf talks about, the doors are thrown open. In my case, the doors were thrown open without any awareness on my part that I even had those doors. There was no effort on my part. But sometimes the doors can be gradually opened if we discipline ourselves in certain ways to ease them open, to look beyond appearance, to become the river and then to unify with the river, as Koestler says. These kinds of experience that these people describe and that I underwent have four qualities which I think any reasonable person would identify as mysticism. In the first place, they are transcendent. They take us out of the here and now, out of the ordinary, normal way in which we live and look at the world. And in so doing, they give us a sense of intense connectedness with everything else that is. We see that there is a pattern or a harmony that we may not have discerned before, living as we normally do in a world of disjointed relationships and hurly-burly activity. And when that happens, our grasp of ourselves as a rugged and radical individual begins to erode. We begin to lose a sense of ego that constantly puts us at adversary with everything else that is, at odds with everything else that is. I am an ego. This world is mine to conquer. And ultimately, it gives us a sense of intense unity. The connectedness moves to unity in which we, the ego, the I, the me, absolutely disappears and sinks into, as Tennyson said, boundless being. It is a unitive kind of experience, which religious mystics will claim is uniting with God, but which people like Tennyson and Koestler and Virginia Woolf we'll all say is a unification with the real, with that which is, with being itself. What prevents us from these kinds of moments, from this kind of heightened awareness in which our ego disappears? Well, I think there are several factors, several moments of non being, as Virginia Woolf would say, that we tend to live mainly in. These moments of cotton wool, which dims our vision and plugs our ears. One of them is that we're always too busy. We are possessed by what our Eastern friends call monkey mind. We are constantly up here, jumping from this to that and the other, looking ahead, looking back, fearing the present. We have all kinds of plans and all kinds of ideas. This stream of consciousness is more of a tornado than it is a stream. We are never quiet. We are never calm. We are never peaceful. And we're rewarded by society for not having that calmness or that peace which will still the monkey mind. So that's one reason, it seems to me, why moments of being are elusive for many of us. And another is this, it's what the 17th century French philosopher Blaise Pascal called divertissement. We like to be diverted, we like to be entertained, we like to be pleased by any number of experiences, and we will throw ourselves into these diversions. That's the translation. We will throw ourselves into these diversions in such a way that we allow them to absorb us instead of us stepping back from them and trying to commune with boundless being, as it were. We become hedonistic. There's nothing wrong with pleasures, my friends, but when pleasures begin to consume us such that we are addicted by them, and when we're already beset by monkey mind, then we have a problem. Then we're unable to focus in any kind of appropriate way that would open the doors of perception. And then finally, let's face it, the older that we get, the more intransigent we become. When it comes to ideas and opinions and judgments, we take on a certain rigidity that puts blinkers on us. We refuse to look at the world in any way but that way which we've decided, damn it, is the only proper way to look at it. And so we close ourselves off to experience. In my case, when the doors of perception were thrown open for me, in the case of Nietzsche and Tennyson and Virginia Woolf and Bertrand Russell and Richard Dawkins and so many other non believers in God, the catalyst was beauty. My friends, if we would open the doors of our perception, I think we need to expose ourselves more and more to beauty, artistic beauty, whether it's painting or music or sculpture, whether it's drama or poetry or great literature. Artistic beauty can open our beings up to that which lies beyond the humdrum quotidian busyness of everyday life. Natural beauty, the beauty of landscapes, the beauty of wild places, the beauty of wilderness that is untouched by civilization, can likewise bring us into a space where we are more able, more sensitive to these moments of being that Virginia Woolf talked about. Moral beauty is another kind of beauty. Whenever we see individuals being compassionate, kind, loving towards others, and even more when we ourselves open our hearts in order to be good to others, we increase our chances of the doors of our perception opening up, such that whether we believe in God or not, we can zoom into a space that shows us that there is more to reality than what we encounter in our everyday lives. And the more we can touch that inner dimension, if you will, of reality, the richer our lives will be. I do not want to say that there's a direct causal connection between young Carey's experience in the soybean field and his later fidelity to the Christian faith. I think it's much more complicated than that. But I do want to assure you that that moment all those years ago changed my life. And I think changed it for the better. I'm so grateful that my doors of perception were flung wide open. And I hope yours already are or one day will be. I'm Father Carey, and this has been another Holy Spirit moment. Thank you so much for watching. I invite you to subscribe if you don't already. But at any rate, I'll see you soon. Bye bye. God bless.